about. Okay. Keir Starmer. I want to talk about Keir Starmer this evening. And the first thing to say, really, is that there isn't... Looking at him, I've been looking at Keir Starmer, reading about Keir Starmer pretty much all day. Well, for a great chunk of today. A couple of things jump out. One, he is portrayed as something of a saint. If you look at his Wikipedia page, for example, in sharp contrast to my own, which portrays me as anything from an idiot to a monster to both, he is portrayed as saintly on Wikipedia. I've watched interviews with him, and not only is he rather uninteresting as a character, the press, it jumps out, screams out at me that the press are very, very kind to him and go very, very easy on him. And the only things that really stand out to me in terms of his political career, he seems to have either avoided much controversy, or he is Teflon, or, as is my own conclusion, he neither takes a position on this side or on that side. I've said this about him before, and this, in looking into him in much greater detail as I have today, that's something that is really, really evident. He has taken, let's just have a little bit look back on his career before he was Labour MP, and he went to the front bench of the Labour Party very quickly, became MP in 2015 for a London seat, went to the front bench very quickly. He became the shadow Brexit minister, and as shadow Brexit minister, he called for a second referendum. A couple of articles I've picked out to look at is one from 2019, where he said, where the headline, this is from the Mirror, and he said, the headline is, Keir Starmer demands second referendum in bombshell intervention. Labour's Brexit chief today publicly demanded a second referendum from the party's talks with Theresa May. In a major intervention, Sir Keir Starmer warned it will be impossible to get any deal through Parliament without a public vote attached. He warned up to 150 Labour MPs will refuse to back a deal unless they can put it back to the public with the option to cancel Brexit and remain in the EU. Now, one thing notable about that is that he did want an option on a second referendum to cancel Brexit altogether, but was very clear that there should be no option to leave with a clean break. In other words, a no deal Brexit should not be an option. Even in this role, he never quite, this is something about him that just keeps coming across. You never quite know what. It's difficult to describe. His language is always very vague. And he's the same. He's now, if he's chopped and changed on immigration or on Brexit. He went from that position where there should be no second referendum to we have to accept the result. And he's saying these two things simultaneously. We have to accept the result, and there should be a second referendum. We shouldn't be able to have a no deal Brexit, but we should be able to cancel Brexit, but we have to accept the result. And this he will say at the same time. And this is this is the only consistency within his political career. He contradicts himself mid-sentence. And that shows up time and time again. It's a similar thing with immigration. I'll give you a couple of quotes from him on immigration over the years. We must reduce immigration. We must sell immigration as a positive. And now his latest is we must overhaul our entire immigration policy. So back in, there's an article here from 2016 saying it has to be reduced, and that he sounds quite serious about that, and he accepted, and this is again part of his inconsistency, in keeping with his sometimes insistence that we accept the result of the Brexit referendum. We must accept, he said, the end of freedom of movement. A couple of years later, he's saying we must protect freedom of movement, but we must accept the result of the referendum. Now he's saying that there has to be a complete, this is the latest from him, that there has to be a complete overhaul of our immigration system. He hasn't given details of what that will be, but we have to have a complete overhaul. He'll talk then about ending migrant detention centres and being kinder to migrants. This is the kind of language he uses. So it's been a little bit frustrating, to be honest, reading about him today and trying to, but it's a little bit like the Boris bodies piling high story. You're not quite, you read it and you read it and you read it, you're still not quite able to put your finger on anything. Now, I find this more and more with politicians and with the media. And I think it's a huge part of what's actually wrong in this country, and a huge part of why people are so confused and so unclear about everything that's going on. It's a little bit like the coronavirus transitions that we've been going through, and the language being used, and the confusing positions being put forward, such as so-and-so many number deaths from COVID went to deaths with COVID, went to deaths within 28 days of a positive test. The language changed. People got really confused. You'll see the politicians on television telling you, if you have other illnesses, don't think that you can't go to the doctor or to the hospital. You must. Hospitals are open for everybody. Despite the pandemic, we're open for everybody. But try getting a doctor's appointment. You won't get one. You may get a video consultation. And I've seen this happen to someone close to me recently. A video consultation first, a dismissal. Here, take some painkillers. We'll refer you to the hospital. You get a letter from the hospital telling you to phone the hospital. You phone the hospital, they have a chat with you, tell you that you have to go off for an assessment again to see if you are eligible for a hospital appointment. So you have to jump through hoop after hoop after hoop after hoop for anything not COVID. Meanwhile, you're being told, go to the doctor. Everything is as it normally is, but it isn't. And things are closed. But the messages keep going. I like clarity. I think you probably know this about me by now. I like clarity. I like to know where things stand. I don't like evasive and vague language because I know what it means. It's usually to cover something up. It's usually because people don't know what they're doing. There's chaos. So when people don't know what they're doing, language becomes evasive and language becomes vague. When language is contradictory, it's usually because whatever the truth is, someone doesn't want you to know what the truth. So we get language that is contradictory. This is absolutely all over Keir Starmer. All over him. It's all over the news in general lately. And I've read a couple of stories out to you in recent live streams, and I've read them to you directly, and they make no sense. It makes no sense. We're being lied to. We are being lied to. There is evasion and inconsistency and contradiction across the board in politics and in the media. And this is personified in Keir Starmer, in his absolute lack of clarity, his absolute lack of conviction, his absolute lack of courage to take a position one way or another is evident throughout his career. So before he became Labour MP, he was head of the CPS. And a couple of little controversies surrounding him during that time involve, for example, Jimmy Savile. Now, either he is Teflon or the press is kinder to him than it would be to someone else, because, of course, he's the Labour leader and the press is so engaged and apologetic for that side of politics. So there's an article here from The Sun in 2020. It's entitled, "What was the Labour leader's involvement as head of public prosecutions in the Jimmy Savile scandal?" So after qualifying for the bar in 1987, Sir Keir acted exclusively as a defence lawyer specialising in human rights issues. In 2008, he was appointed Director of Public Prosecutions and Head of the Crown Prosecution Service, holding these roles until 2013. He approved decisions on high-profile legal cases, including the shooting of Jean-Charles de Menezes, who was killed by Metropolitan Police in 2005. Sir Keir was also involved in the case relating to the death of newspaper vendor Ian Tomlinson in the 2009 London riots. After leaving the role of DPP, he was selected to be the Labour Party's parliamentary candidate for Holborn and St Pancras in 2014. He was elected in the 2015 general election with a majority of 17,000. After Jeremy Corbyn's re-election as party leader in 2016, Sir Keir accepted an appointment to become Shadow Brexit Secretary. Now, how was he involved in the Jimmy Savile case? Investigations into the horrific acts committed by Jimmy Savile began before Keir Starmer took the role of DPP in 2008. A few months before he took on the role at the Crown Prosecution Service, Sussex Police launched an investigation into a possible sexual assault, but took no further action as the complainant did not wish to give evidence. In 2009, the CPS reviewed 4 sexual assault claims against the disgraced TV presenter, but felt there was insufficient evidence with which to proceed. The CPS came under fire for their decisions not to prosecute, and while the Labour leader had no involvement in the decision not to prosecute, he commissioned a review of the service. Led by Alison Levitt QC, Sir Keir revealed failures at the heart of the CPS and issued an apology, saying a fundamental shift was required, as the nation cannot afford another Savile moment in 5 or 10 years. First of all, there are Savile moments going on all over the country all the time. And secondly, I'm not seeing a passionate demand for prosecutions of the rape gangs that are still operating with impunity across the country to be brought to justice by Keir Starmer. And if he had the backbone, he could and should be doing that. But that's the only real scandal I can find involving him, as when he was head of the CPS. It is all really rather vague. But one thing that does, just scream out, I'll stop talking about him now. But one thing that does absolutely scream about him is that there is no firm position. His language is evasive and vague, and it has been throughout his political career. He has gone from we must reduce immigration to we must talk well about immigration to we must overhaul immigration. He has gone from we must have a second referendum while simultaneously saying we must respect the result of the referendum. We must understand that the British public want less immigration, which is part of why they voted to leave the European Union, to we must protect freedom of movement after we leave the European Union. All of this, he is saying, in the space of a few years. In short, he has no courage of conviction and he cannot be trusted. A bit like the media that reports on him. Let's have some questions. What with Anne, with everything that's happening, can For Britain restore normalcy if elected during the next general election? It took decades. It really did take decades to get into this. What it will take to get out of it is firm, strong leadership and courage. And I say courage because I think the lack of, for example, Keir Starmer, the lack of clarity from him, the lack of consistency from him is a lack of courage. He is the kind of leader who is led rather than doing the leading. I decided a long time ago that I was never going to be able to please everyone. And if you try to do that, it's a mug's game. And in this job, in this role, you have to accept that no matter what you do, someone's going to be unhappy with you. Someone's going to be upset. No matter what decisions you make, same, someone's going to be unhappy with you and someone's going to be upset. So all you can do is stand by your own convictions and persuade people to come with you. That's what a leader should do. And that's the courage that is lacking in both Keir Starmer and in many respects in Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson has been similar in many, many ways. He too has chopped and changed on immigration, for example. And it's immigration is an issue that people do chop and change on because they know that the media is going to jump all over them with this. It's an issue that the media and the left-wing media, particularly left-wing commentators, and the word racist will be attached to it. So Boris Johnson is little bit, no better. In fact, he has chopped and changed on immigration as well. We want and need clarity and courage in leadership positions in this country. We are tired of people who will stand up and repeat politically correct sound bites in order not to upset anyone. It's never going to work. You're never going to not upset someone. But you're also, if you take that line where I will say what this audience wants me to say on a Monday and say what this audience wants me to say on a Tuesday, all you are doing is getting through it personally as unscathed as you can get through it. There is nothing you are going to change. You're not going to make anything any better. You're certainly not going to bring normality back into society or to this country. You are merely trying to get through your own tenure, your own time, with as little damage as possible. And I think that's what politicians have been doing for a long time. I think it's what Keir Starmer is doing. I think it's what Boris Johnson is doing. We need courage and we need clarity. We need someone who is not going to back down, who is going to stand and take the punches and still maintain their position. With that, then yes, we can get normality back. And the reason I believe that more even than I always have is, like I said at the start of this live stream, what we see, the manipulation of what we see on the internet and on the media is not what people are thinking out there in the real world. They are genuinely not normal. You use the word normal. The people still are normal. They still do want to live in a sane society. And many of them still do live in a sane society. So yes, with a bit of strong, courageous leadership, we can turn this around, and I think turn it around quite quickly. Someone who is willing to go out and have a consistent position, who is willing to say what is evidently and obviously true to the vast majority of normal people. Absolutely, you can turn this around very, very quickly. But you have to have the courage of your convictions. You have to maintain a consistent, clear, evidence-based position. And you will, if you do that, bring the normal majority with you, and you can turn this around quite quickly. And standing on the doorsteps and talking on the doorsteps has in fact reinforced my belief in that. It has strongly reinforced my belief in that. We can, the country is still sane. It really is. But the media manipulation, the social media manipulation, would have us believe that that's not the case. It's not nearly as bad as you might think it is when you get out there and talk to people on the doorstep.